what we all are really striving for is how do we navigate the conflicts across all we want to do in our life and with our work? And so what I'm trying to point people to with the method is a path to sustainability is to align the right ambitions at the right time with the right effort. And the purpose is to end up with a collection of self-defined, meaningful, and motivating goals that are right for you now and aligned to your desired effort and sustained energy.
There are opportunities for our work and careers everywhere, if you know where to look. That's easier said than done, especially in our fast-paced and constantly changing world. Marianne Fairmouth is talking to experts, employers, and job seekers to bring you insight and understanding about what's possible. This is Career Can Do, where we're navigating the new work world.
Hello, everyone. It's Marianne Fairmouth, and welcome back to the Career Can Do podcast. Today's episode is a little different and really exciting because I'm handing the mic over to a special guest host that brings a wealth of experience and a unique perspective, and I'm confident you'll find both insightful and engaging. I'm truly grateful to have them guiding today's conversation, and I know the episode is in excellent hands. Please enjoy this special edition of Career Can Do.
Welcome to the Career Can Do podcast, a top global podcast dedicated to helping you navigate the new work world. My name is Chris Sandland, and I will be the host for this episode. Today, I have the pleasure of sitting down with Kathy Oneto, founder of the Sustainable Ambition Movement, host of the Sustainable Ambition podcast, and author of the soon-to-be-released book, Sustainable Ambition, to talk about one of the hardest things in life to find. Everyone is looking for it. It's seemingly impossible to find, and the definition is unique to each person. And what I'm talking about is work-life balance. Kathy, thank you so much for joining.
Happy to be here, Chris. Thanks for having me.
So, Kathy, you've had quite the background in corporate America with big names like Clorox and Minted. You've worked in a natural food startup, a branding and design agency, and now as a coach, speaker, and facilitator. I want to talk about what brought you to this point and how you came up with Sustainable Ambition. But first, I want to ask you, in your view, is work-life balance real, or do we have a better chance of finding Bigfoot?
I think Bigfoot, actually, perhaps, So, yes, I mean, I just think the term work-life balance, it's elusive. And I think, the challenge that I have with work-life balance is as a term, I understand what people are longing for, but my concern with it is that it sets the wrong expectations. And I think it remains elusive because of those expectations. And some of the expectations are things like balance suggests equilibrium and that we're always going to be able to keep work and life in equilibrium. And that's just not reality. And so that can lead to constant frustration. It makes us think that we can have hard boundaries between these two sides of ourselves. And yet, especially in today's world, they are more integrated than ever. And I also just don't like that the term puts work first as opposed to seeing work as a component of our holistic life.
So tell me a little bit about yourself. How did you get to this point? Where did you come from? Talk about your experience to date.
Yes. Well, I mean, I have 2 business degrees. I've worked in corporate America. I have primarily a background in marketing and branding, but I've always been asking these questions, myself ever since I started looking. Okay, this is going to really date me, Chris, but ever since I started looking at books about colleges and trying to think about what I wanted to major in. And then when I went off to college and started to really question myself, like, what did I want to pursue when I was at university? And were certain ambitions, were certain goals actually things that I wanted? Was I just going after it because it's what's expected or what's respected, as opposed to, was it truly something that I wanted? And so at some point in my career, I talk about inflection points in my book, and I hit one of those inflection points myself and was looking at, well, what is next for me and my career? And I stepped into this space of exploring sustainable ambition becoming an executive and life and work coach and started to really dig into this topic of sustainable ambition. How do we pursue what we want across our life and work over time?
Fantastic. You mentioned about your book. It is coming out in June. We're all very excited to get our hands on that. And that book title, Sustainable Ambition, you're talking about your method. So can you help our listeners understand the method that you've derived in the 3 points that they're going to see in that book?
Yes. So, you asked me about work-life balance, and as I already shared, that I don't like that term. And I think where I like to point people instead is to shoot for life work sustainability and to build resilience. The other thing is, I think that what we all are really striving for is how do we navigate the conflicts across all we want to do in our life and with our work? And so what I'm trying to point people to with the method is a path to sustainability is to align the right ambitions at the right time with the right effort. And the purpose is to end up with a collection of self-defined, meaningful and motivating goals that are right for you now and aligned to your desired effort and sustained energy. And I just want to say that this isn't easy. I don't have a magical wand or a magic pill that we can take, which is why it's a method. We need to practice this. And the other important part, and you alluded to this, Chris, at the beginning, which is this is personal. And so when I use the term right, I'm not trying to say that there's a right or wrong here. It's really, can you tune in to understanding what is really right for you? And that's really a critical component of the method.
So when you're asking yourself what is right to you, how do you help people reconcile the realities of what's going on in the work world with try to juggle that balance?
Well, I think one place to start is the right ambition component, which is around right ambition, where I point people is to look at their personal motivators. What really is meaningful and motivating to them? And there are 4 that I talk about in the book. So one is, what is your vision? What is your vision for your life and for your work? How do you like to give and contribute? This is really about purpose and why. The third is about your values. What do you value, both in your life and your work? And then the fourth is around, what do you love? So tapping into those intrinsic motivators, what pulls you towards things, what satisfies you? And so part of aligning to your own definition of success or reclaiming some of this is to align to your own motivators. And within the current work world, and whatever is happening is, how do you motivate yourself within that context? So instead of, say, for example, so many of us, just to pull one thread through, so many of us, 70%, according to a McKinsey report from a few years ago, are looking for purpose in our work. And yet oftentimes we're looking to the company to provide that purpose, as opposed to looking to ourselves and saying, well, how do I like to give? How do I like to contribute? What kind of impact do I like to make through my work? And how can I create that for myself so that I can motivate myself within my work world? And I think when we take on that agency, it allows us to be in control wherever we operate within the sphere of work today.
If you're finding yourself in a job where the motivation is low or the alignment or the balance is not there, what are some tips that our listeners can use and employ to try to avoid the ultimate demise, which is burnout?
Yeah, so this is where I'll just go back to the method a little bit, but just to deploy it in a way to answer this question. So one is to start with that motivation side, which is to connect yourself to your work. Are you motivated to it? Can you find some connection through those motivators so that you are motivating your effort as opposed to it feeling like drudgery, right? So I think work is an important component of our lives. And most of us, it's a human need or desire to want to contribute. So how can you find that connection? In terms of the second, right time, it really is about focus. And so within what you're doing within your job, can you create some focus and go back to, depending on where you're operating within your organization, right, in your level, how can you challenge to get clear on prioritization? And not just prioritization in terms of, and this starts to step into the right effort piece, but not just in terms of, okay, what are my goals? What really is a priority? But also, which of these really requires or demands my hardest work? Which really do I need to deliver excellence on? The reality is everything we're doing within a day or at our jobs does not command the same level of priority or degree of effort, and we should be discerning about that. The other thing to think about within that is to get clear on and understand where are your strengths and where can you take a disproportionate, like by leveraging those strengths, you could actually be more efficient. Like something that's easy for you can be really hard for somebody else. So how do you really lean into your strengths so that you can find, hey, I can do this in a simpler, more efficient way? The final tip that I will give is to also just remember, some of us might remember the Pareto principle of the 80-20 rule, which is just to remember that like you can get 80% of the way there with 20% of the effort. And so challenge yourself to do a sprint on some type of activity that you have so that you can simplify things down and get the majority of the way there. And that likely will create a lot of efficiency for you within how you're working today.
Absolutely, absolutely. For someone who's been, following your principles, in a job that they've been in for a while, but they've decided that, hey, you know what, I just don't think I have it in me to stick it out, or this is not going to work for me, or this is, now that I'm here and I've done this for a while and I've had different experiences, I've seen different parts of this job or this part of this business, I think I want to do something else. For someone listening, is it ever too late? Would you ever advise someone, hey, you're close to the end of your career, maybe you should stick this one out, or, you've got a really lucrative job, maybe you should consider toughing it out. Is it ever too late to make a change? Does your book have an expiration date, or does your method ever have an expiration where you would say, hey, my sweet spot is here, but after that, you're kind of outside of the range?
So I think in a principle of sustainability, I'm going to say it's never too late to make a change. And yet there's always caveats, right? And I think that people have to be discerning about looking at what's important in their life and how work fits into that context. So I think thinking about your stage in life and what's happening in your life and what's important now, I think is really important when making some of these choices. So there's no absolute right. And this is where it comes back to being personal. So just to give an example, like you may be in a situation where your home life is stressful or challenging, or you have something happening with one of your family members where you're like, wow, that is really needing a lot of my time and attention right now. And yes, my job may not be wholly optimal, or I may feel like I'm hitting up on my growth curve and I'm looking for a change. But in this moment, where do you want to put your time and attention and effort? And you may make a strategic choice to say, hey, I'm going to go ahead and stay in this job for now because I can coast a little bit, if you will, while I'm putting time and attention on my family. But perhaps once we get past this state, let me see if it's then time when I can make a shift, when I can make a change towards something else that I want to explore.
Absolutely. Have you ever met somebody who is too ambitious? And how does that go? And how does that play out? For someone listening who has their eyes on the prize or has their eye on the C-suite, what should we tell them? And what are things that you've seen in practice with people who are hyper ambitious? And then conversely, for those who may not see themselves hyper ambitious, is that wrong? Is there a problem? How do they navigate that in their work world and in their careers?
I love this question. Yeah, I mean, I really hesitate to tell anybody that they're being too ambitious. I do want people to dream big. And yet there is something to this point of being hyper ambitious, and where I say it can go into the severe zone. And I think the reality is we as humans are not wired to be driving hard all the time. And so I think what's important to me is like, look, I also don't like sustainable ambition to be a judgment zone, or I want it to be a free judgment zone, right? Where it's kind of like, look, you do you. Just what my hope is for you is that it is sustainable. And that if you are going to go for big things and everything all at once, that you have structures in place to support you so it is sustainable. How are you going to put structures in place both in your life and at work to make it sustainable? And then are you being discerning about your sustaining plan? How are you going to restore, protect, and support your energy so you can stay sustained? Because there's research that shows that overly ambitious people have health consequences, get overly stressed and have the consequences of that. And so there are costs and downsides. We are making trade-offs oftentimes when we go into that severe zone. So then to just briefly answer your question about like, oh my gosh, I'm not as ambitious. My belief is there are different states of ambition and that it does ebb and flow. And I think we need to allow for that. I really do. And my guess is what often happens is that people think, oh, I've lost my ambition. And I don't believe that people have lost their ambition. Oftentimes it's either dormant or it's just that you're shifting your ambition. Your ambition is not focused, say, on your job right now. Your ambition is focused on raising your family, as an example. So that's what I would say is like my hope with my work is to really bring more joy, peace, and ease to people navigating their lives and work and what they want to build for themselves. And so that's part of my counsel is like, just be generous with yourself, be kind to yourself as you navigate this, because it's a human journey and it's not easy.
You talked about putting structures in place. Can you give us a couple of examples? Like what types of structures for those hyper ambitious people would you recommend they employ to ensure the ultimate success?
So, for example, one might be to have a structure in place around, for example, something as simple as exercise, right? Or, I was interviewing Laura Vanderkam recently, who's a time management expert, who advises like having a bedtime, right? And so those are even things where it's like, have a structure in place around that. So having a structure around, say, exercise could be, if you can invest in a trainer, having that, or attending a class, or knowing that you have a favorite Peloton class that you like to get on the bike for at a particular time, right? Create that structure. At work, it might be, you know what? I block every Friday afternoon so that I can plan my next week and be really strategic about where I'm putting my time and effort, where I'm actually cutting things and declining meetings that aren't important to me. So those are just a couple of structure examples.
Awesome. Well, Kathy, thank you so much for coming on the show and sharing your knowledge and wisdom. What are two main takeaways you want our listeners to glean from this interview, and how can people find you?
So one is just, which I might not have said this yet, but just to tune in and pay attention to what is happening for yourself in your life and your work. It's so often that we go on autopilot, and it's really important to just check in with yourself. And I say to be more consciously ambitious, knowing what we want, if things are shifting on us, and importantly, to just be proactive about managing our careers and our lives. I think the second piece is kind of where we were starting to get to, which is really, I advocate in the book having a sustaining plan, like to not take it as a given that you know how to keep yourself operating at your best. We humans are not machines. We operate between two states of using our energy and then needing to restore it and get rejuvenated. Don't think that's just going to happen on its own. Really be intentional about how are you going to sustain yourself. And then thank you for asking about where people can find me. So people can find me at my website, sustainableambition.com. I also have my podcast, as you mentioned, which is on all podcast players. And people can also follow me on LinkedIn.
And your book is coming out in June?
It is.
Very exciting. How can people find out about your book?
Yes, they can also find that at all publishers, but also they can find more information on my website at sustainableambition.com/books.
Awesome. Well, Kathy, thank you so much. Can't wait to get my hands on a copy of that book. And that wraps up another great episode of the Career Can Do podcast. See you on the next one.
We thank you for tuning in to our Career Can Do podcast. We make no guarantees on results for your particular quest, but we hope you enjoy the information presented. The views and opinions expressed in this program are solely that of the guest or speaker and do not necessarily reflect the views or positions of Marianne Fairmouth and Fairmouth and Company. Thank you.